Welcome to Sleeper's Corner. I am Rock, and this is my channel. I have written and recorded stories for you to listen to whilst you drift off to sleep. This is my very first video, and the very first story that I have written for you. It is, for want of a better terminology, a launch story for the entire channel. Perhaps it is a little autobiographical, and perhaps it is not. So, with no further delay, I invite you to get nice and comfy. I invite you to close your eyes and to relax. This here is Sleeper's Corner. You step out of the dark into Oxford Street's bright morning. Daybreak happened hours ago for everyone else, but the fresh early morning breeze on your face makes it feel like dawn is arriving now, just for you. You steady yourself on the pavement and taking stock, you perform a self-audit of how it is that you are feeling. The alcohol that you indulged in last night is fading. The sway has gone, but the joy that this entire night has brought you, that is not going anywhere. Instinctually, you rub your arms as if you were cold, but despite the fresh early morning air, you feel quite warm. This right here is London inside of the thickness of summer. It is a London when it is not raining from morning to night. You look up at the blueness of the sky, thinking to yourself how this city in the sunshine can be so beautiful. Silently, you continue your self-audit. You are tired, but you are not exhausted. You have not slept since you awoke yesterday morning, but within your body, an excited energy exists, and though you're looking forward to sleep, you tell yourself, not just yet. You are not hungry. You ate plenty of nibbles here and there throughout the night. The truth is, this self-audit that you are performing, it can really only tell you one thing. Right now, you feel fantastic. This, you tell yourself, this right here, it's the dream. As you tilt your head back and raise your face to bask in the striking sunshine, you recognize that you are quite literally living the literary dream. You inhale a deep lungful of early morning air and you hold it inside of your chest. This is it, you tell yourself. After so long, you are close to finally making it. You have emerged from a dark underground bar. Maybe it was a nightclub, though there really wasn't much activity on the dance floor. You have climbed stairs to rise up to meet the morning traffic that pushes its way along Oxford Street. All around you, on the wide pavements that are bordered by countless stores that are yet to open, wave after wave of humans walk past you. They all seem to walk with an intense intent. All of the faces of all of these people living their own lives, locked within the walls of their own worlds, carrying expressions of a quiet focus as they make their way to jobs and offices and other workplaces. You think back to a time when, just like all of them, you too would have been making your way to one job or another. It wasn't that long ago, but because of where you now are, it feels like another life that was lived in another age inside of another world. You take a left turn and weaving through the oncoming traffic of humans, start to move westwards along Oxford Street. Inside of yourself, deep down, hidden somewhere beneath your ribcage, situated near where your heart sits, is a place that swirls with a feeling of intense activity. You are barely capable of stifling the climbing urge to laugh out loudly, or to punch the air, or to yell to the world an exclamation of a celebration of what feels like the very hard-earned victory that you now feel you are so close to achieving. You are here, within this moment, and you can feel inside of yourself that if you have not yet crossed that much-chased finish line, then at the very least, you are closer to it than you have ever been. Looking around you, seeing the many faces of those that pass you by, you find yourself drawn to reflect on the particulars of the long journey that you have embarked on, the long journey that has brought you here. Your mind is somersaulting. There are thoughts racing within the tall walls that hold in your thinking, thoughts jumping like jackrabbits in a field, and they are all about your past. This surprises you. It is, you suppose, never really that strange to begin to contemplate the intricate details of your past. But you do question why this contemplation is occurring here and now at 8 a.m. on a busy thoroughfare in central London. This busy thoroughfare in central London is Oxford Street, and the truth is that it is not really the home of any kind of inner introspection, even if this street does have a somewhat eclectic character. If a street were able to ever hold a personality, to ever display a distinctive quality, right now, you probably would struggle to find anything positive about this one. You cannot help but carry the inclination within you that no one in their right mind would want to spend any considerable amount of time here. But when you think about it, you would most certainly be mistaken. What you walk upon right now, it is the busiest high street in the whole of the United Kingdom. It is one of the busiest streets in the entire world. Oxford Street is what shopaholics would describe as a paradise. It has everything a shopper could ever want. It hosts every popular shopping outlet that you can imagine, sometimes repeatedly. If, for example, you are looking for a specific shoe by a specific brand, and in one store they do not have your size, you can walk 400 yards further up this long road to try your luck in another store by the same brand with the same shoes in stock. Looking around, you can see why it gets so busy and why it reportedly attracts an estimated 500,000 daily visitors. It is a 1.2-mile-long horizontal overflowing river of consumerism. Brands fight one another for the glances of the passerby, employing energetic window displays, flashing lights and loud music that spills out of the invitingly beckoning doorways. You stop in your stride and turn to look up and down this vast Broadway. So many recognizable brands are stationed here. So many stores, over 300 in fact. During busy periods like Christmas, it is nigh on impossible to walk through the heaving crowds. You have to dart in and out of the way of the oncoming tsunami of people who rush to fulfill Christmas present lists before time runs out. Oxford Street is not only populated by stores and people, there also is traffic here. Right now, you look out into the road and you can see a multitude of black cabs, and you can see the big red double-decker buses. Both are memorable London icons that adorn the countless London postcards that visiting tourists are almost obligated to buy. Both the taxis with their shiny black curves and little yellow taxi signs sitting above the windscreen like cute hats, and the large red rectangular double-decker buses slowly push their way along the street. The traffic pulsates, and as it does so, it creates an almost exquisite melody of a mechanical hum that right now you find to be surprisingly calming. Even now at 8 in the morning, this famous promenade feels somewhat alive, perhaps not as alive as it will be in a mere few hours when the hordes of shoppers will rise up out of the underground stations and swarm this entire area. Yet it still has plenty of life. As you continue to walk from the bar that you spent the last 8 or so hours inside of, you pass stores that are yet to open. Through the windows, you are able to witness a controlled state of hyperactivity as workers ready displays and straighten stock before the doors open. Much like a growling apex predator hidden in the undergrowth, waiting to pounce upon its prey, you can feel that the monster that is this street is awaiting to awaken. It stirs within its own echoes. It is calm, but only until it no longer will be. Only until it isn't. You are strangely contemplative this morning. It surprises you. It is not, after how last night went, something that you would have ever imagined expecting. You find yourself contemplating your own relationship with this street. You acknowledge that this is an epicenter of consumer activity, and for some reason, this causes you to struggle to not dislike what this street represents. You understand that the aversion to Oxford Street that you feel in all probability can stem from a basic hostility to the ideals of overt consumerism. Yet simultaneously, your aversion to Oxford Street seems to be encoded within you at a deeper and more profound level. Sure, you can find on an agreeable surface a disconnect from the excessive materialism that is on display here, but you cannot shake a distinct sense that what you seem to feel originates from something or from somewhere that is even more personal. Either way, you are on your way, and you find yourself quickening your pace so that you can exit this area as soon as possible. Up ahead of you, across the road on your right, is the Goliath that is Selfridges. It is a massive department store with a white stone frontage that oozes extravagant decadence. You find yourself falling within yourself, falling through a hidden trapdoor in your mind, and almost accidentally, almost without even trying, you reach back to another time, to a distant you, and you're able to grasp the notion that stores just like Selfridges for so very long represented everything that you were forced to feel was always out of your reach. Starkly, you are somehow reminded of what you had subconsciously chosen to forget. You want to continue to feel fantastic, so you remind yourself that right now, you're on the very verge of being able to gracefully walk into giant department stores just like Selfridges and pretty much be able to buy anything that you could want. Despite not wanting to, you understand that this is a representative of a change. It is a change of your circumstances, and by and large, such changes of circumstances should be celebrated. Yet beneath all of this fabulousness, something else lives. Much like a growling apex predator hidden in the undergrowth waiting to pounce upon its prey, you can feel that a monster of what you feel is awaiting to awaken. It stirs within its own echoes. It is calm, but only until it no longer will be. Only until it reveals itself to you. Perhaps the monster that you can feel within is some form of buried memory of a time that for you represented another existence. Maybe everything that you now live has willfully been separated from that past, like the amputation of the soul, the shunning of a time that you silently have chosen to purposefully overlook. People continue to rush past you. The closer it gets to 9 a.m., the average start time for most workers, the more urgent the pace of those that are trying to get to wherever they are going gets. You remember how once upon a time, you too would be going to one job or another, and you too would be hurriedly flirting with lateness. On the road, traffic continues to do the opposite of rushing, but above you in the clear blue skies, the rising sun continues to shine down upon you. Maybe you think to yourself, it is the residue of the alcohol, of the many too many drinks that you drank last night that is creating a fertile landscape within your mind which encourages you to be as contemplative as you now are. Or maybe living in the shadows of the background of your mind, crouched behind the energy that you now have. Your mind, primarily driven by sleeplessness, is wandering towards darker alleyways because a broad tiredness is rolling up its sleeves and now wants to have a chat with you. Either way, entirely outside of your control, inside of your own mind, you are stumbling into a whirlpool of reminiscence. Perhaps it is an unwanted twisting riptide, but it lives and breathes, and from you it demands your attention. You collapse into the morass of remembering your own past. It is not a past that you avoid or a past that you necessarily do not want to remember. It is just something that somehow you do not really ever find yourself thinking too much about. But maybe, here, so close to that finish line, it is not such a terrible thing to look back at your own start line. Sometimes you cannot know that you are in a race. Sometimes you just go along in a race that you did not know you were partaking in. It overtakes you. But when that finish line approaches, you have to contend with the fact that all the way back there, whether you want to embrace its remembrance or not, there will always be, and there will always have been, a beginning. The blue sky that is above you seems to be so very pure. A beautiful sheen of cleanliness from above cascades downwards onto the city. The sky shines, and it glows almost as if it were a lake that is reflecting sunlight off of its tranquil and calm surface. Maybe there exists within you a reason why you are reluctant to reminisce, or maybe you just haven't given yourself the opportunity to engage with your past. At times, moving forwards can be such a priority that what lies behind naturally gets overlooked. Why not remember? Why not explore what you quite possibly have chosen to forget? Why not delve deeper into yourself? You recognize that you primarily are here because of who you are, and you recognize that you have reached this very moment because of every little thing that you have lived. And in life, is it not true that nothing can ever totally be an accident? Everything now surely must exist because of all of the everythings that came before. And so, you delve into yourself. Years before, when you were a kid growing up about 6 miles from Oxford Street, you would visit this place, and you would marvel at the very same things that you now dislike. Growing up in New Cross Gate in southeast London, filled with excitement, you would gleefully jump on the number 53 bus and ride it all the way here. You would find yourself a seat on the upper deck and watch yourself getting driven into the belly of the beast. The younger you would feel so much excitement, and you remember how it felt very much like you were visiting an entirely different country. The flashing shop lights haven't changed much. The lighting has evolved away from the incandescent bulbs to the new shiny LED bulbs, and now those bulbs twinkle in a smoother yet quicker way. But lighting is still only lighting. The intention of those that flick the switch remains the same. Different songs would overflow through the doorways, but music is still music. The intention of whoever pressed play also remains the same. Wide-eyed, the younger you would enjoy the experience of being swept away by the tidal wave of manufactured excitement. For the younger you, Oxford Street felt like what Vegas must feel like for a gambling addict. There existed stark contrast between where you grew up and this world of Oxford Street. You would come here and almost live a holiday. You would temporarily be able to play pretend with a life that was just not yours. The two places were consummate antipodes. They existed beneath the very same sky, a sky that sometimes was blue, a sky that existed above the very same city, yet everything about everything felt so diametrically opposed. You push your mind through the barriers of time and you force a deep excavation into the catacombs of your mind. You force yourself to be able to remember your childhood. Maybe things grow to become forgotten for a distinct reason. Maybe you have not thought about where exactly you have come from because not all starting lines can be picturesque. Maybe you forgot to remember because what you could remember was better forgotten. As you push forwards along Oxford Street, you push deeper inside of your mind, deeper inside of yourself. You recognize that you are right now so very close to a precipice, so very close to the summit of a mountain that maybe you have chosen to not even remember ever beginning to climb. And you think back. You think inside. You think within. You delve deep into uncharted territories and you explore a land that somewhere along the line you have allowed yourself to forget. Oxford Street is your base camp, but the high altitude summit is somewhere inside of you, somewhere that has been long buried within. You are able to walk along avenues within yourself just as you physically walk along Oxford Street. You can remember growing up in New Cross Gate. You can remember that in the thickness of long summer days, you would feel a sensation whereby the air carried upon the breeze seemingly possessed a distinct texture. Back then, in that past life of yours in New Cross Gate. As a youngster, you felt that you had to learn how to breathe through a heavy thickness. When that heat of those summer days hit, everything felt heavier. Everything back then seemed to feel thicker. The glossy shops of Oxford Street are beginning to open doors as you walk past them. You wonder where it is that these memories have been living. It has been an age since you last really thought about your childhood. How often does somebody excavate their distant pasts? What is it, you ask yourself, that you are now really remembering? And why now? You stop in your tracks as other people move past you, and you turn to look back at Selfridges. It was a poverty that you experienced. It was a poverty that for some reason you have chosen to forget. Today you are remembering almost a taste of your childhood, though you cannot be sure of the reasons why these memories are striking you now. But they are. You are able to remember your early teens, and you can understand that though you never starved, though you never needed to walk 5 miles for clean drinking water, you can though remember that time of your life being showered by an awareness of an existence of limitations due to a lack of money. Bits and pieces. You can remember fragments of sentiments. The shoes that you wore on your feet were old and they were frayed. The faux leather would eventually thin out and fade away. As you now walk along Oxford Street, past countless shoe shops, past countless clothes shops, you can remember how the trousers that you wore to school would shorten around your ankles the taller that you grew. Now, as an adult, you wonder perhaps for the first time ever if you had ever grown up differently, if perhaps your childhood could have ever been a graceful experience. Then could this euphoria that is inside of you as you approach this finish line feel so resplendent? Would the feeling of this fabulousness that now reverberates throughout your body and throughout your soul even exist? If you had had everything that you had wanted, would all of this amount to just more of that everything? Would all of this be more of the same? You pass shops and stores with lifeless mannequins in the windows wearing whatever is in season. You wonder if people see these mannequins wearing an outfit and think to themselves, yes, I want to look like that lifeless thing. You let out a long sigh as you recognize that this morning you are full of questions, many of which are meaningless. Your wonderings about mannequins you recognize is merely a way to distract yourself from the more pertinent realizations that a part of you yearns to hide away from. And what you have hidden yourself from, what you have hidden from yourself are truths that perhaps you chose to conveniently not confront. But this morning feels different. It was always going to be different. The life that you have forgotten, it has merit. And the life that you lived, where it could have been beneficial for you to forget your childhood, is a life that must now be over. You are in a process of a rebirth. You are so very close to finally making it. The journey that you have been on for so long, the slow climb, is almost reaching its end. Perhaps it is time for you to embrace that forgotten past, to no longer overlook it, and instead to champion it. You can remember how, across the broadness of many summers, you seemingly felt as if you were carrying a heavy load that stretched across your chest. And now you tell yourself that you need to be better in touch with the person that you now are. As you walk along Oxford Street, you tell yourself that you should push to remember more, that you should excavate deeper, because to be able to truly relish your present, you must understand how this journey first began. This morning is different, and what you now are doing is rediscovering the person that you once were. You look back and reach into yourself. You reach into the hidden vaults where your memories lay. You stretch out your fingers as you graspingly touch the edges of something that has long been buried. That proverbial weight that you can vaguely remember carrying, it was always with you. You never really have been able to shed it. You just managed to grow accustomed to it. It sat on your chest It weighed down your shoulders like heavy, invisible baggage. You can remember a persistent sense of being engulfed by everything that constituted your young life. From your memories, you can decipher a consistent theme within your childhood. You can see how you were constantly haunted by the emptiness of everything that you knew you couldn't afford to do or couldn't afford to possess. It's a strange truth to acknowledge and wholly inconsistent with the laws of physics, but you can vividly remember living a life whereby you felt that you were chained to an invisible anchor. That inexplicable, anomalistic sensation of a heavy weight perpetually minimized much of your childhood experiences. You could hear it echo in the voices of adults. You could see it bearing down on the faces of the locals as they went about their own lives in New Cross Gate. That weight, that particular viscosity which carried you as if you were its shadow, was always there, and it almost became the entirety of you. It is possible that living through your own personalized era of poverty within such a world, even your perspectives became compromised. Inevitably, though, it is not only your view of the world around you that changes, but the way you grow to see yourself also changes too. It may just be invisible to the eyes of others, but everything you eat, everything you taste and smell and hear seemingly has that added weight to it. You remember those days, those years, that life, and you realize that it was a stain on you, even a strain on you. But only now, years later, can you understand that it was also only ever just temporary. Yet back then, it didn't feel that way. Temporary can stretch long enough in time that it begins to feel like a continuous constant. It feels like a long street that will never change direction, nor will it ever end. And on that specific road, it's difficult to imagine another way. You're disconnected from other roads, from other routes. You have this, and sometimes the world will show you another way, but in doing so, it only showed you what you couldn't have. It felt as if it was laughing at you. The younger you would watch television and see the lives lived by others, and even at that young age, you knew all those things. Television shows like Cash in the Attic and Home Away from Home, all those TV shows, they implied a different life. You were aware of it even then, at such a young age. And you were aware that that life, it wasn't for you. It just was a reminder of how the lives being lived by others in their pretty roads and leafy streets altogether was a different life to yours. It grew to be just one more reminder of how there was so much that existed that was always out of your reach. And no pretty street told you that story more than Oxford Street. You were only ever a casual observer, a person that could look but never touch. Or if you ever did touch, you could never own. When you were in your early teens, you can now remember that you were evicted from your home. You can remember how your family would be moved around, different roofs, different front doors, but still that same sense of never really belonging anywhere. It became apparent to you at a young age that there was an entire existence that you just wouldn't experience. The absence of things, possessions, options, and avenues is always an addition of something else. The only place the younger you could ever find solace within, the only avenue that you felt allowed you to enlighten yourself from the entanglement of the weight, that heavy weight, was in the pages of books. Stories written heroically by people you'd never met, who gifted you the ability to galvanize your soul and realign your spirit. Stories written by gods of words, stories that the younger you loved to read, stories that opened your mind and unleashed something that was repeatedly crushed by the perennial weight of your reality. There, and also inside of your head, in your own expanding imagination, were strongholds of your own construction that gracefully enabled you to eloquently dream of a different existence for yourself. You remember once telling a teacher when she asked what career you wanted to have when you grew up. You told her that you wanted to be a famous writer, someone whose words the world would hungrily devour, and your teacher raised her eyebrows and asked you what you really wanted to do for a career. But you remember, it was always in the stories. You remember that you would write them, short stories, and you would show them to people, teachers, your parents, your friends, and they would read them. And they would say that what you wrote was nice, but maybe too boring, maybe too serious, too fanciful, too dark, too slow, too funny, too fast, too trivial for anyone to ever really like them. You remember how you'd get discouraged and not write anything for months, and then you'd find a story, or rather a story would seek you out and find you, and you'd have no choice but to sit down and bleed from the depths of your heart all over that page, all over again. You exposed yourself. You peeled away your defenses to allow the water of your words to flow freely. It was a castle of strength, built tightly with bricks of vulnerability. It was like a disease, like an abusive partner that raised your spirit to great heights and then crushed you in its palm. You found love in the thing that was able to hurt you the most. You remember how you would write with beauty in your heart, and it would be received with despondent and indifferent ugliness. People said you talk too much. They'd say, shut up. People said you thought about things too deeply. They said, stop thinking about stuff that doesn't matter. People would say, almost with no regard to how the words would hit you, that someone like you could never be a writer. You could write, but never would anyone publish your words, let alone read them. And so, you would stop writing. Instead, you'd do something else. But all those other things that normal people did, that normal kids your age, your gender did, like play sports, watch movies, drink beer, get into fights, listen to music and chase girls in darkened bars, none of that really made you happy. Some of it did, sometimes for long enough to allow you to forget what always bubbled beneath you. Much like a growling apex predator hidden in the undergrowth waiting to pounce upon its prey, you'd feel that the monster that was your need to write was awaiting to awaken. It stirred within its own echoes, and everything was calm, but only until it no longer was. Only until you no longer could not write. The writing was always awaiting to erupt out of you. It was always pushing and pulling at something deep inside of you, eroding any enjoyment of anything else in your life. Your desire to write, the thing that you couldn't help but do, the only thing that could truly make you happy, sat in your deepest, darkest of shadows and waited for a light to shine upon it to emerge in order to declare itself as your only true self. And everybody said that you couldn't, even as you continued to do so. And people said, it's nice to have a hobby, but it won't put food on your table. It won't feed your kids. You never saw it as a hobby. It was always more of an obsession. For you, there never really existed another choice. There really wasn't another way. You didn't need writing to feed you, or to feed the kids you didn't have. But the words spoken by others still stung you. And because it was said in such unison by so many, you began to believe it. You began to believe them. So many people can't all be wrong, you'd tell yourself. Maybe they could see something that you simply couldn't. As you made your way through your teens, you could feel yourself disconnecting from your writing. Those things that briefly gave you happiness, that you had always regarded as mere distractions, slowly grew to become paramount activities. Without your writing, you fell completely into another world. The absence of things, possessions, options, and avenues is always an addition of something else. The absence of your writing, the way it could make you feel, the glow that grew from within as you sat alone at a desk and configured stories and constructed characters upon a page. That feeling was now gone. On one cold evening, as you struggled to remain detached from writing, you concluded that you had to replace it with something else. You could find new avenues, new options, and perhaps a new obsession to keep your mind company. But whatever it was always something less. You found a solace in alcohol, in drinking until you fell. You even partook in drugs that numbed your heart and made your mind race through dark corridors that led to nowhere fruitful. And then you jumped in and out of numerous beds with numerous girls that you never had the courage to learn deeply about. From drunkenness to being high to the faceless orgasms, everything you found was less. But because the mountain seemed too large to ever climb, you truly felt that you had no other choice. You still had to find a way to alleviate yourself from that weight that you had always carried, but you found that without the writing, only things which were partial and temporarily euphoric could ever come close to replacing within you what writing had once given you. You are now thinking back to that then. Inside of this present, you are cascading into your past and you question, was it always so terrible? Everything that you once were, the memories you locked away in the very deepest of vaults inside of your own mind, you now question if it all is what has made you who you now are. You had always found a delicate poetry in the rugged streets of southeast London. There was an animalistic toxicity, yes, maybe a very liberal helping of harshness too, but maybe it was not unlike anywhere else. If you attempt to put a positive spin on what you can remember, then you really needn't dig too deep. The thing about growing up where you did is that it was always more intently focused. The disparity of socio-economic equality is only measurable when there's a certain level of control, a conduit to which you can compare. Because so many people around you were also teetering on the edge of poverty, you didn't know that you were poor. Because so many around you struggled, it didn't feel like your household was struggling too. Because so many families around you were evicted from their homes and rehoused into the darker pits of social housing, you didn't understand that this was a negative thing. To you, this was just life. Until you'd visit Oxford Street, or you would watch TV and catch a glimpse of how others lived their lives. The streets of New Cross Gate and the surrounding areas were populated by carriers of hard luck stories that reached from their pasts and pulled at your future. The friends that you began to spend time with, every single one of them seemed to be under no illusions. Their futures would undoubtedly feature entanglements with the police, perhaps include stints in prison, much like many of the members of their families had done. The prevalent feeling was that these paths had already been written for them. It was an altogether accepted and an eventual expected outcome. For a while, this written path seemed to be yours too. You found yourself believing that your future would be the same as theirs. As you zigzagged your way through your teens, you would do less of what you loved and more of what you didn't. You can look back now at how you would spend your evenings and weekends and how they would consist of loitering outside of fast food places, maybe congregating around park benches with groups of like-minded friends. This kind of behavior today would probably be called antisocial, but you can remember how there really wasn't much else for you to do. Already, you were growing into the role of being an orphan of your forgotten world of writing. Time would pass, and you would continue to waste it. On one of those wasted evenings, as you congregated on a street corner, a disagreement occurred, which then evolved into a fight, and fists were thrown. It was an uncoordinated, youthful melee, a disjointed fracas more than it was a brawl. Nonetheless, you remember how afraid you felt. It frightened you, and you found yourself withdrawing from that scene. It wasn't for you, and you quickly realized that you needed to find a new obsession. That night, after the fight, you walked home through the graffiti and litter-strewn estates, passing abandoned cars with broken windows and flat tires. Just as this morning, is to some degree a turning point for you, so was that night. Something was born inside of you. An idea, a desire, or maybe a conviction. It slowly galvanized within you. It wasn't too late for you yet. You grasped onto the understanding that you were not too old to avoid those already written pathways for people of your age, for people from your type of upbringing. The same fight that empowered local people to break free from their financial skewered shackles in order to just, every day, every week, and every year survive. You could tap into that measured fury, and you could take ownership of that same energy to divert the trajectory of your own journey. Looking back now at where you came from, you know that it gave you something that you never found in the lecture halls of your university or in the office spaces of the jobs that you worked. There was insight driven by a frantic desperation to pinpoint a target, and then there was a stubborn and relentless pursuit of it. That drive, you learnt that on those southeast London streets. You inherited from the forsaken and neglected neighbourhoods a particular characteristic. From the canyons between the tall council flat tower blocks that cast shadows down onto the derelict and boarded up houses below, that echoed with the unmistakable credence that in a world of such starkly obvious disproportions, you have to reach out, you must reach up, and you have to take what isn't yet yours. You have to grasp it tight, never let it go, and ultimately, you must make it your own. For many people who lived around that area, who were there at that specific time, it meant burglarizing houses or stealing cars. For you, though, it meant breaking free from those shackles and ascending prognosticated conclusions. For you, it meant carving your way through the heavy walls of resistance, smashing yourself a pathway that could lead you to the mountain that you had yearned to climb. The people who had so avidly dismissed you as a writer, what precious and valuable insight did they ever possess? Why were they so right when disparaging you? And why did you ever listen to them? An obsession derives from passion, and passion cannot be dismissed. It cannot be overlooked. It cannot be sidestepped, nor can it be forgotten. If you could write, you would. If you could write, you knew that you should. And if their negativity attempted to extinguish your fire, it would only work if you allowed it to. Those people weren't the police, and even an organization as powerful and far-reaching couldn't prevent the people of your part of Southeast London from getting what they wanted. So why would you allow anybody else that wasn't even the police from preventing you from doing what you loved? How could you be told no when writing was the only yes that you could ever understand? Thinking back to that time, particularly how you felt about your life after that violent night of thrown fists, you were able to see that you were capable of turning something negative into something positive. You refocused all of your energy, and slowly you began to believe in yourself as a writer. You would write stories about nothing, stories with no real pathways, but you could feel a beauty in what you wrote. Over time, you came to the conclusion that education was really your only doorway into the world that had always felt out of your reach. Your attitude to learning changed, and at school you find yourself ignoring all the usual distractions. You dug deep. You shrugged off the weight that you'd always carried. You drew for yourself a finish line and steered yourself towards that new plateau. You struggled your way into university against all of the odds. You were hoping to learn how to become a better writer. You wanted to be a magician with words. You had so much hope that even as your expectations began to shrink, even as the world you had entered began to take a very different shape, you could still carry yourself through it all. You remember how you would write, but were instructed that you should adopt a different style. You would persevere with your own voice, one that was chiseled by those South London streets and all of the experiences that you had lived through. You repeatedly were told that it just wasn't good enough, And you eventually found that university only told you how everyone else wanted you to write. Not like you, but like the many who had come before you. Learning and studying in England, you learned and studied English writing. Dickens, Austen, Wilde, Shakespeare and Orwell. Sometimes you'd get to flirt with the outsiders. Marquez, Dostoevsky, Murakami, and Achibi. But regardless of where all those people had come from, you didn't want to write anything like them. No, you only wanted to write like you. You wanted to be who you were, and you wanted to use words how you felt they should be used. Sure, you were open to influences, but you despised the rules. You hated the restrictions, and you abhorred the expectations. And then you made a decision that could have been the biggest mistake of your life. And you left. Dropping out of university unaccomplished, you couldn't help but think to yourself, now you definitely can never be a successful writer. But every story that you wrote, every character that leapt from your mind and kamikazed themselves all over your page, to you, they were already successes. Yet inside of yourself, you shrunk a little deeper. The fear of the realities created by others shredded your self-belief and tarnished your successes. Because against your own sense of self, you realized that if you couldn't have their version of success, you would never be able to fully celebrate your own version of success. For years, you hid yourself from the world. The life that you had lived in South London became entombed inside of a silently forgotten crypt, and your writing only lived inside of your own mind, never on the page, always locked within an internal cage. It never died, but it also never breathed. For years, and after leaving university, shriveled by a strange type of shame, you only jumped from job to job, from career to career, but nothing ever really fit for you. Nothing ever quenched that thirst. Nothing could ever satisfy you. Along the way, you met other humans, and you now realize that they must have seen something in you that maybe you never did. They would talk to you and try to decipher the hidden codes of your presence. You were never really open with people, whether it be romantically or just in a social setting. You were hiding the world from yourself, and you were hiding yourself from the world. Much like a growling apex predator hiding in the undergrowth, waiting to pounce upon its prey. You can look back at who you were and how you were, and you can see that a monster that could write was always awaiting to awaken. Because you could not write, you could not be you, and you could only ever stir within your own echoes. You hid yourself away, but a clock was calmly ticking, but only until there was no more time left for you to waste. Over the years, you would fall into different relationships with different women who would slowly drag your dreams out of you. Sensing your inner sadness, they would ask you what it was that could make you happy. And when you finally tell them what it was that was missing from your life, they'd encourage you to write. And sometimes, emboldened by their belief in you, a story would rise up to the surface, rise out of the many hidden chambers inside of your mind, and you would write. Lying in bed, your legs entangled together, you would read from a battered notebook the scribbled stories that you had written. But this gave you very little solace. You never felt like the words that you wrote were for you, but rather were written for them. You wrote to appease the desire to appease you. It was like you were speaking but with somebody else's voice, or even when it was your voice, what was written felt like they were somebody else's words. You wonder how many people live life today like you lived yours then. How many of the people who you may pass here on Oxford Street as you walk towards Marble Arch quietly suppress chosen dreams from the uncomfortably more comfortable choice of caution. How many people were told they could never reach what they set as a target and therefore dropped arms and gave up the battle? How many potentially booming voices were hushed with a promise of safe mediocrity? How many lives haven't been lived because fear decapitated the dreaming head, leaving behind a soulless carcass of the unadventuring? Security, you realize, is a very beautiful scam. They are not unlike the insurance policies that hinder exploration. For so many, 100% of nothing is a better equation than 0% of something. And it makes sense to err on the side of caution. But it is a form of self-imprisonment. Choosing to lock yourself in a cage, much like you had done for so many years, and then throwing away the key, doesn't change the fact that you are locked in a cage. But everyone is sold the idea that it is smart to be cautious. But this is where being smart, at least their version of smart, is tantamount to the embracement of willful stupidity. You find yourself walking towards Hyde Park. Maybe you can find a bench to sit on for a few hours. Your mind is rushing, and you would like to take an extended moment to analyze everything about last night. It was a long night. So many people approached you and shook your hand and told you how what you had written had had an effect on them, and how inspiring they found your words. Imagine a birthday party where you're the center of attention. Imagine countless strangers that have been invited to celebrate your special day. Now imagine hearing them say that the day is not what is special, but that you are what is special. That because of what you wrote, because of what is being published, you have made their lives better. Imagine the boy in South London hearing that you are a unique, and hearing you are an important talent. Now imagine that when you look into their eyes, as they say these things, you can see their sincerity and you can feel it. You actually know that they really, really mean it. Initially, you were nervous last night. You were awkward because this kind of praise has always been so uncommon to you, so unheard, it made you feel uncomfortable. You can look back at your childhood, and you can look back at last night, and you can question if you're reacting in the correct manner to their kind and positive words. You can now remember that you didn't know what to do with your hands. You wanted to clench them into fists, but it's hard to hold eye contact, to smile whilst looking like you're preparing to punch someone. You really didn't know what to say, or how to react. You silently asked yourself if you should simply nod along. Should you have agreed with their praise? Should you raise a defensive hand and say no, no, no? Instead, you smiled. You thanked them. You felt appreciated, and also you felt deserving of such appreciation, because you know that what you're talking about, the writing that they refer to, wasn't some kind of fortunate accident. You wrote a book. You wrote a novel. Finally. And the truth is that it was the most difficult thing that you have ever done in your entire life. At times it was torture. At other times it was joyfully blissful. But it was always difficult. It cost you. As you wrote, you harshly excavated from deep within. You ripped away at your own skin, shredded proverbial veins and arteries, and you tore at your own flesh. You shone bright lights into the darkness, and you navigated your way through the sacred corners of your mind in order to truthfully write a piece of honest fiction. You can remember how you had hoped that people, that strangers would like it, that they would at the very least understand that you were not trying to just be smart. You were just trying to share. Simultaneously, a part of you did not care if they didn't understand what you had written. You were concerned, but did not care if they could not grasp the meaning of what you meant. You wrote for you, but you yearned for others to agree that it was worthy of their time, that what you had written for you was worthy of their attention and of their understanding. You wanted to write for no one else but yourself, while simultaneously writing for everybody else. It was a difficult contradiction, but it was one that was completely true. You remember how for so many years you held multiple stories inside of the vaults of your mind, how they lived rent-free inside of your brain but never got a chance to breathe. It must have been 2 years ago now, that a new idea crept inside of your mind, an idea that bridged so many of the already created concepts that you had held for so long. You were then working as a bookseller in a second-hand bookshop. You can still remember the smell of the place. It is funny that, ordinarily, when things decay, gradually they smell worse. But not books. The older they get, the better. The more the page is free, the more that the paper on which those magical words are printed upon spoil, the richer, like a very fine wine, they smell. Working there, in one of the many jobs that you have had in your life, you were surrounded by daily reminders of everything that you were not achieving. Upon every crooked shelf existed the persistent presence of all those messiahs of the word that you had wished to follow, all those that you yearned to emulate. And every day customers talked to you about books. They asked you for your opinion about writers, and you smiled and you spoke to them, but inside it burned you because you weren't talking about your own writing, about your own books that you dreamed that you could point them to. Then, on one quiet afternoon, while sat behind the counter, seemingly from nowhere that you can even begin to identify, the idea for a novel crept inside of your mind, and almost like a squatter, it made itself at home. The idea began to decorate the place, to organize the furniture to its taste. Behind your back, at the front of your mind, that house grew into a building with an extravagantly deep foundation and solid walls. The idea opened the door and one day said to you, "Come inside. Look what I've done to the place." And proverbially, you walked in and immediately you were impressed. How could so much have been created right under your nose? How could something so sound, so solid, so beautiful have taken shape without you even noticing? The formulated structure of your novel began to take shape. Inside of your mind, you got to meet the characters you would write about. You learned of their dreams, of their fears, and it almost made you cry. You walked the many rooms of this structure, impressed at every turn. Mentally, you repainted some of the walls, moved the piano forward into the living area, changed the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling windows, rearranged the plates and cups in the kitchen cupboard, until everything finally fit perfectly. And then, like a demon, you wrote. You disregarded fear, and you just let the words fall onto the page. Everything that was not yours would become yours. And then, last night happened. A party organized by your publisher to celebrate the success of your novel. Any way that you look at it, last night was a long night. You were approached by many people who questioned how you formulated the concepts for the story that you had written. You wished that you had an answer for them. Some disguised their excitement more than others. Others enthusiastically predicted awards and prizes. People that you had never met spoke to you as if they had known you for their entire lives, as if you were long-lost friends who had recently gotten reacquainted. People you recognized from the entertainment world, actors, directors, musicians, and artists, all positively praised what you had written. Your publisher, your agent, routinely throughout the night checked in on you. They would ask, "How are you feeling? Are you okay with the attention?" When you nodded, when you smiled, their words changed. Instead of caution, they spoke with relentless excitement. "You're going to love America," they told you. "You're trending to be #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list." The sales, they said, are going crazy out there. "It's unexpected," they said. "We have to get you out there to squeeze as much out of this as we can, whilst you're still so hot." And according to them, right now, you are very hot. Remembering last night, it makes you smile, but it also drags a tiredness from your bones up to the surface. You arrive at the end of Oxford Street, and ahead of you, across the road, you can see Marble Arch. At one time, this large structure must have been a pure white, but years of living life in central London have turned its marble stones into a pasty grey colour. It stands isolated and surrounded by roads carrying heavy traffic that drive past the arch. Park Lane, Edgware Road, Oxford Street, Great Cumberland Road, and Bayswater Road all converge here. Beyond the arch, just behind it, is the striking greenery of Hyde Park. You are tired and are longing for your bed to fall into a deep sleep, but before that, you are eager to maybe find a bench and to think about the previous night. The sun is slowly climbing higher into the sky, rising up to shine its light and warmth down upon London. You turn and look behind you at the arch, and you see that, though darkened by age and pollution, it still is a majestic sight. It stands with a silent pride, almost as a declaration of its own celebratory existence. Built back in 1833 to commemorate the British victory in the Napoleonic Wars, you find yourself feeling an affinity with it. Life, not just London life, but all life, can darken colours. The purity of the Carrara marble from which it is built has now faded. The tiny particles that have landed upon the white marble now add weight to the structure. And you too can feel that weight. You have felt that weight so many times, packing your belongings and repacking them when you were moved around due to the many evictions you experienced during your childhood, just like how the arch was moved in 1850 from outside of Buckingham Palace to stand here. That weight that persisted throughout your younger life, it has now faded, much like the white of Marble Arch has faded. Time can cause a lot of damage, yet much like you, Marble Arch still stands. As the world passes by, it still stands. Just as all those people that diminished your ability to write have passed you by, here you still stand. Not all victories are the same, and not all victories are celebrated. Some victories, however small, still carry meaning, and some victories can do much to destroy the weight of the emotions that you cannot identifiably quantify into words. Even through the creeping tiredness, you feel refreshed by this realization. You smile to yourself because you cannot help but understand that it is a long way that you have come. Last night, as the party thrown by your publishers in a Soho bar began to depopulate, a group of famous actors invited you to carry on the night with them at another venue. These people, the select few, the enlightened artists of today, spent the rest of the night sharing their own experiences, their own stories of how they made it, and asked you about your process, asked you about your journey. As you spoke to them, you saw their eyes open wider. It made you understand the weight of your victory. Like an arch, standing tall, standing achieved, standing successful, both in yours and in their versions of success. As you walk along the pathways of Hyde Park, you are struck by how, in only a few yards, you feel transported to an entirely different world, a world of green in the midst of a heaving city, a world with an entirely different atmosphere. To your left, the busy Park Lane produces thick traffic like an endless conveyor belt. You see those same famed red double-decker London buses carrying armies of workers to their places of employment. This view is interspersed by large lorries and trucks that are surely destined to deliver goods to one of the numerous stores along Oxford Street. Ahead of you, you can see the sprawling green of Hyde Park. The grass stretches out far into the distance. You can still hear the traffic, but it seems somehow disconnected from where you now stand. The silence of the greenery seems to eclipse the sounds of the metropolis that surround you. This, you think to yourself, must be what Central Park must feel like in the midst of Manhattan in New York City. You'll soon find out if this is true, as you were told last night by your agent that your publisher had organized flights in the coming days to New York City for a hastily arranged book tour. You think to yourself that all journeys must begin somewhere. No one can ever know where these journeys can end. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and they have an end. Some begin cradled in the amazing arms of beauty, but ultimately end badly. Some embark on an opposite pathway. But stories are stories, and everyone has one, and everyone lives their life with their own beginning and their own middle, and finally their own end. Every story you tell yourself is a journey. You know that you began your story somewhere that essentially you chose to hide from yourself. but you also know that that beginning was the foundation for you, the foundation of you. You wonder if the moment that you now are in, if it is the middle part of your story. You do not know, but you sure are enjoying it. You are enjoying the sense of weightlessness that now surrounds you. You have carried so much for so very long. You have felt burdened by all that you somehow convince yourself to forget. But who you are is because of everything that you have lived. You now walk through London's Hyde Park and you eye some of the benches and consider taking a nap on one. For some reason, the idea, though physically appealing, feels misjudged. You can see the headlines already. Young best-selling writer sleeps on a park bench after a night of debauchery. Instead, you spy a tree and visualize yourself taking a brief nap beneath it. You can see yourself already sat with your back leaning against the thick brown trunk. Yes, you think to yourself, that works for you. It worked for Sir Isaac Newton. Best to avoid any apple trees, though. As you walk along the pathway of this glorious park, ahead of you, a small congregation of gathered people stand around. They are in separate groups. You realize that this is the famous Speaker's Corner. It is a historic place where anyone can come and speak their minds. It welcomes interaction whereby anyone who is passing by can stop, can spectate, can listen to what is being said, and can even heckle. Heckling is actually encouraged, as it is seen to be in the spirit of discourse and in the spirit of communication. You stop and look at the crowds and you formalize within your mind how this is not too different from YouTube videos. Feedback, even the harsh kind of feedback, is always appreciated. As you approach the small crowds of people, the voices of the speakers grow louder. Some talk about bicycles and others talk of tax rates, but quintessentially, everyone here is doing the very same thing. Everyone is speaking their version of their story. They all have beginnings, they all have middles, and they all have endings. As they speak, sometimes there are gentle murmurs from the crowd, sometimes there is laughter, and also there sometimes exists the approving cheers that rise up to meet the silence of the sky. But of course, there are also the jeers. Your heart swells. Are you not, as a writer, the same as these speakers? Are you not sharing your very own story? Aren't those that speak their minds doing exactly what you have always wanted to do? You find a tree. It has a wide base. There is a comfortable looking patch of grass to sit upon. And so you sit. The voices of the speakers from Speaker's Corner rise up into the air and travel to meet your ears. There is a comfort for you in hearing those who yearn to share their stories. You may not agree with anything that they have to say. You may not like the way that they tell their stories. Yet you cannot help but love what they are doing. You cannot help but appreciate that right now, they are right here for you. And all of this is totally free. You smile to yourself as you slowly close your eyes. Everyone, you think, needs a Speaker's Corner to help lull them to sleep. Except, this is no longer Speaker's Corner. You smile to yourself as mentally, you christen this place Sleeper's Corner. Sat on the grass, leaning back against the trunk of this tree, you close your eyes. As you begin to slowly drift off to sleep, your soul opens and embraces the fact that here, in this corner, everybody is welcome, especially you.